Welcome to Fortitude Valley. This is going to be a two-part documentary about the history of the valley. Part one will be about the time from just before European settlement up until about the 1880s, and part two will be from then on. And there's a very important question I would like to answer about the valley. Was Fortitude Valley built on a lie?
The Turrbal Indigenous group is most closely associated with the valley area. However, many tribes would sometimes visit for important events. The Roma Street parklands were used for corroborees and tournaments. And at York's Hollow, you had a large permanent campground. So the valley area was a place that saw a great deal of human traffic passing through it over the centuries.
Perhaps the oldest surviving map of what would one day become the Fortitude Valley area was this one, created in 1844. It does show a trackway leading from just north of Andrew Petrie's house up towards Breakfast Creek. Now, we don't know the origin of this trackway. It may have been an Indigenous trackway, or it may have just been put through by some of the early settlers. The first European name to be associated with what would become Fortitude Valley was Bell's Vale. Well, who the devil is Bell? It was named after Lieutenant William Bell of the New South Wales Veteran Company, 48th Regiment. And he apparently, we believe, was some sort of surveyor up here. He also had his role looking after convicts, transporting them from Sydney and Port Macquarie up here. But he has an association with this area, something to do with surveying and maybe mapping. Maybe he had a little house here, I'm not really sure.
Lieutenant Bell apparently protested against the severe punishments handed out to the convicts. It is presumed that the name Bell's Vale was named for Bell's exploring and surveying work, rather than for his more humane endeavours.
There is a Bell's Square on Anderson Street, not far from here at Victoria Park. And interestingly, Brook Street, a very prominent road running through Fortitude Valley, that was originally known as Bell Street up until 1875. This is Ann Street. On Wade's 1844 map of Brisbane, he listed it as proposed road. You can actually see, if you look closely on the map, it's pretty much just a pencil line. He took a ruler and drew a pencil line straight, and so it was known as the proposed road. It also was known at some point as the Eagle Farm Road and also as the High Road. And the reason why it was known as the High Road was because it went over Duncan's Hill.
Scottish-born Presbyterian clergyman John Dunmore Lang visited Moreton Bay, and he found it bereft of Protestants. His plan was to form two colonisation companies, one for the Port Phillip district in Victoria, which was opening up, and another for Moreton Bay, or Cook's Land, as he preferred to call it.
But he was impatient with government bureaucracy, and mainly because they were not interested in funding his scheme, he decided to fund and organise the entire thing himself, hand-selecting many of the colonists and sending them out here on 3 ships. And he went even further than that. He distributed land orders to the colonists, even though he had absolutely no authority to do so.
The Fortitude, with 256 migrants on board, left Gravesend in England on the 14th of September 1848 and arrived at Moreton Bay on the 20th of January 1849. Their journey to Moreton Bay had been suspected by some in Brisbane, but no one knew how many were coming or what their intentions were once they arrived.
The migrants, bless them, all believed that everything had been worked out and that land had been pegged and was sitting there waiting for their arrival for them to occupy. The colonial government in Brisbane was certainly not about to just hand over land to Lang's migrants simply because he wanted it. As there were 2 cases of typhus aboard the Fortitude, everyone on board was quarantined on Moreton Island for 2 weeks. That actually gave Police Constable John Wickham time to try and sort out this situation of just what to do with these people. Now, Wickham, taking some pity on these people and realising that he couldn't just let them be homeless and wander around, allowed them to settle here at York's Hollow, Victoria Park, just down from Gregory Terrace, which is behind me on that high ground just there. This really was a case of out of sight, out of mind. There was a stipulation though. They were allowed to build their own little temporary homes, but they were not allowed to cultivate the land. On the 19th of February 1849, the migrants from the Fortitude came here to Queen Street to attend a meeting at the old courthouse. That was actually originally the convict barracks just behind me. That's where it used to be. They came here to give thanks for their safe arrival in Moreton Bay, and it was reported at the time that this was the largest public gathering Brisbane had ever seen. Unfortunately, reality would soon set in.
For the migrants, the Yorks Hollow area was not the happiest place. At that time, it was in the middle of nowhere, a remote, thickly forested region very much cut off from Brisbane. And occasionally, there were fights between the local Indigenous tribes, one of which resulted in a man's head being cut off and his body hacked to pieces by his opponent.
To be honest, I don't think anybody knows exactly whereabouts in Yorks Hollow the colonists set up their temporary homes. At the time, further down the slope that way, that was where all the waterholes and lagoons were, and that's where the Indigenous camp was, and had been there since time immemorial. Quite a high population camp at that. So I think for the colonists, look, they just come from the other side of the world, they were strangers in a strange land, and they decided to stick together and probably just build their temporary homes somewhere up here on the slope where I am now, just trying to put ourselves in their shoes. They don't know what the Indigenous people are like, they don't know what sort of reception they might meet, and just tried to make do as best they could. So what were the colonists going to do? I mean, they couldn't stay here at Yorks Hollow forever, and they were acutely aware that their situation was going to be temporary. They were there because of charity. So the decision that they came up with was to decamp from here and go down into a clearing in the bushland, down in a valley area. And there they re-erected their homes. That place is now at what we know as 186 Wickham Street. And this is 186 Wickham Street. Where they set up their homes, well, was round about just down there, that open air car park. When they re-established themselves down here, it was next to a creek, and this was all dense bushland. Later on, this became the site of the Rex Hotel. That's what used to stand here. This site behind me, this big bit of open ground, has been open and abandoned since 1981. So that site down there, that is actually the valley of Fortitude Valley. I've just moved down to Ranwell Lane behind Wickham Street. The colonists moved down here. There's the car park there that I was just looking at. You had the creek flowing through here, and then just beyond that there was the old trackway leading from Brisbane up to Breakfast Creek, and I suppose up to Eagle Farm. So the land rises up that way to St Paul's Terrace, and it rises up that way to Ann Street. So to answer the question posed at the beginning of this documentary, did John Dunmore Lang lie? Well, yes, he did. He lied to the colonists, making them believe that everything was worked out, the land was waiting for them, and it was going to be the paradise they all hoped. And of course, when they got here, reality was very different. Is it a case of the ends justify the means? Maybe.
Two more Lang ships soon followed. The Chaseley arrived on the 1st of May 1849 with 214 migrants, and the Lima arrived with 84 migrants on the 3rd of November 1849. Oh, and by the way, Lang Park is named after John Dunmore Lang.
Just across the road there is McWhirter's. That was the site of the village water pump. That's where they got their clean water from. In the 1850s, Ann Street was the main and in fact only commercial precinct in the Valley area. Brunswick Street, surveyed in 1851. Scotsman William Augustine Duncan came to New South Wales in 1837. Some years later he moved up here to Brisbane and in time became the first collector of customs for the city. It was in 1854 that he built himself a house, which he called Dara. That house used to exist just behind me here, on Ann Street. The hill that he built his house on became known as Duncan's Hill. Later again, that site there became the site of the proposed and partially built Holy Name Cathedral, which would have been the largest Catholic cathedral in the Southern Hemisphere. Duncan Street, just nearby, is named after William Duncan. Today it's the Chinatown Mall, although it's not very Chinesey anymore.
This hill more or less separated the lands of North Brisbane and Fortitude Valley, and his house was little more than a flat-roofed mud dwelling. Duncan left Brisbane in 1859 and his house was sold to Patrick Mayne. 2 years later, in 1861, Bishop James Quinn, or O'Quinn as he preferred to be addressed, arrived in Brisbane and he purchased it 3 years after that. In 1890, a larger, more elegant house was built for Robert Dunn, the second Bishop of Brisbane. In 1917, Archbishop Dewig bought it.
That's the Royal George Hotel. It opened in 1854, but as the Lamb Inn, a lot of cattle and horse sales were conducted here for two reasons. First of all, there was a lot of paddocks around the hotel, and secondly, because of Ann Street, a lot of cattle were transported along it. The top floor, the third floor, was added in 1924. As a content creator, I know that if something were to happen to my computer, I don't want to be wasting valuable time mucking about trying to find someone who can repair it. That's why I'm proud to be partnering with the sponsor of today's video, Mobile Computer Geeks. Do you need a computer repaired or an upgrade? Maybe web design, web hosting, business emails, or IT support? They've got you covered, and with same-day service, they can come to you. All you need to do is click the link in the description and use the coupon code TECHROB to get 5% off. And it's raining. I'm just down from the intersection of Brunswick Street, which is just behind me, and Berwick Street. I think people here pronounce it Berwick Street. This was the site of an Indigenous camp. Right about here, across the road, is the Bushell's Tea and Coffee Factory, the former one. It's now the Institute of Modern Art. The camp was here. One of its residents for a little while was an Indigenous lawman by the name of Dundalli. He was here, and he was, we would call today, a guerrilla fighter. He opposed European settlement in this part of Australia, and the people at the time thought of him as a savage and a murderer, etc., etc. He was betrayed by a fellow Indigenous person and handed over to the authorities and was sentenced to death. And so it was in 1855 that Dundalli was executed here on what is now the site of the GPO. Before this was the female factory. After that it shut down, it just became a general prison. So somewhere around about this spot, he was hanged. Oh, and the hanging was botched. Dundalli was so tall that when he fell through the chute, he actually hit the coffin below. Some people had to come along and grab hold of him and pull down on his body to make sure that his neck snapped. The first Methodist church in the valley was built facing Ann Street, which is just here. It was on the corner of Warner Street. Well, that's Warner Street behind me. It was on either of these corners. It was either where the bird's nest is now, or just under where the car park is. It was in 1871 that the second Methodist church was built in Fortitude Valley, and it's this one right here behind me. It used to face Ann Street, which is just over that way there. Now there's a building in the way, you can't see Ann Street. When this church was built, it was one of the most substantial brick churches in Brisbane. And this is the third Methodist church. It was opened in 1889 and is just behind the second Methodist church. It's now an architect's office. I visited this church in the past, went inside. This is what it looks like. So in 1854 you get W.A. Duncan building Dara just here. Across the road in 1858, which is the site of All Hallows, and if that damn bus would move I could show you, on that side over there in 1858 a house called Adderton was built by Dr. Fullerton, one of Brisbane's very first doctors. And it just so happens I've been given permission to go over there into All Hallows and take a look at what remains of his 1858 house. Let's go in and have a look. This here is Adderton House. What you see here today represents a lot of add-ons over the decades that followed. But the doorway, which you just see over there, and a couple of the windows either side, in fact there they are, 1, 2, 3, 4, these are of the original design from 1858. The upstairs as well is part of Adderton, but all the rest, all these add-ons over there, the top floor, these all come later. This became eventually the convent. And in this sketch, also from 1858, you can see Ann Street, which is still being more or less constructed. There's a tree stump in the middle. In the background, you can actually see Adderton House. Oh, and they've got some tremendous views from here. There's the Story Bridge out there. But I think what's even a better view is if I come up these stairs here. I'm going up the stairs into the old original entrance of Adderton. There's the door. And this is it. I'm actually walking inside Adderton House. And there's the staircase. So this entry hallway here, a couple of rooms either side, the staircase over there, this is part of the original building from 1858. Wow. So the staircase is just there. If you walk along this hallway, these are the old wooden floors, and you'll notice that the style of the floor changes when you get to here. This here was where Adderton House originally ended. So this is the old wall here. You can see the different finishes on there: 1863, 1892, 1930s and 1950s. Back out on the veranda here, and there's the windows. That one there, that one there, and then there's two more. There's two more just down here. What a beautiful place to go to school.
In 1858, Wickham Street was surveyed. Unlike the other straight roads which were being plotted out in the area, Wickham Street curves as it follows an old unnamed creek. For a time, Wickham Street was known as the Low Road, as it was used to go around Duncan's Hill.
Now this is something really cool I found just recently. It was an article written by a W. Stone for the Brisbane Courier newspaper on the 19th of December 1925. And in it, W. Stone reminisces about growing up in Fortitude Valley. And he or she says that in the 1870s or so, 1860s maybe, Ann Street, the shops along here, would stay open late on a Saturday evening. So that meant if you wanted to catch up with friends and go out and do some shopping and have a drink and get something to eat, you came to Ann Street in the valley. Catch up with your friends. I'll meet you in the valley. Some things never change, and it reminds me of that song Coming Home by Shepherd. Awesome song and a truly awesome local band. Love them. It was in 1863 that All Hallows moved to its current site. But how did All Hallows get its name? There is an idea that it was named by Mother Vincent Whitty. There is an All Hallows in Dublin, in Ireland. And that in turn was named after the All Hallows by the Tower Church in London. And I've actually visited that church. Not only does it date to about the 7th century AD, but if you go underneath it, which you're free to do, there's no charge, you can see the old floor of a Roman house down there.
The letters on the front gate of All Hallows read AMDG, Ad Majorem Dei Gloriam, which translated means for the greater glory of God. It is the motto of the Jesuits.
Down here on Ann Street, those two buildings across the road there, especially that one on the right, that's Bragg's Bakery. That was built in 1865. Thanks very much. He loves my channel. Built in 1865. The building next to it is the Apothecaries Hall. Now that says 1862 on the top. It actually dates from 1882. And down the middle is Bakery Lane, just nice, cafes and all that sort of stuff. But isn't that incredible, that building there, 1865? A rare survivor.
In the 1870s, Duncan's Hill was cut down to allow easier road traffic between the valley and Brisbane. The hill had always been a drama for people and goods getting between the two settlements. A further reduction in its height occurred in the 1920s, and this necessitated the alteration of the stone entranceway to the All Hallows School. Due to the land regrading, the height of the entranceway became taller.
Back on Duncan Street, Chinese merchants first appeared in the valley area in 1874.
And here's another example of how churches jump around the landscape. This time, it's the primitive Methodist churches.
The first primitive Methodist church was built somewhere around about here, near the intersection of Brunswick Street and McLaughlin Street, and for some reason I'm standing in the middle of McLaughlin Street. The second primitive Methodist church was here on the corner of Adelaide and Creek Street. And this is the third primitive Methodist church. This is on Brunswick Street at Fortitude Valley, opened in 1876. Well, it was actually started in 1876 and construction carried through until about 1900, but I've never been here before. This place was named in honour of Sir John Kemp, and he's got half the alphabet after his name. Commissioner of Main Roads. Okay. That cute little house you see across the road there, that's Doggett's Cottage. It was built about 1880 for Harry Doggett. At one time, he was the mayor of Brisbane, and that was in 1913. The building is a very simple, four-roomed, single-storey house. Anyway, a rare survivor from that time, and a lovely little cottage. The 1870s and the 1880s saw a proliferation of churches here in the valley, and soon afterwards, a lot of hotels too. Although there'd been a few hotels beforehand, like the Royal George, but you know what I mean. 1877 saw the opening of the Holy Trinity Church on Brook Street. Been inside that one as well. This is what it looks like. There you go. Holy Trinity. Wow, that is beautiful. Oh, let there be light. Oh, that's beautiful. Thank you, Lynn. Oh, gorgeous. Nearly ran me over. 1882 saw the opening of St Patrick's Catholic Church on Morgan Street. I've been in there too. That's the Valley Presbyterian Church. It opened in 1885, though the date at the top says 1884. That refers to when the foundation stone was laid. This is on Warner Street. The land to build the church cost £500. Today, it's an indoor golf course. Really is so surreal walking around here. I know it was a church, and you can still see the church here. It's intact. The 1880s were an economic boom time for Queensland, and in particular for Fortitude Valley. In part 2, we'll see how Fortitude Valley exploded in terms of trade and wealth, and then later on, how parts of it literally did blow up. So thanks for watching the video. I do appreciate it. Please consider hitting that subscribe button, and I'll see you again in part 2.